prime area for the development of Islamic finance as well. Not only North Africa, but Sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa. Islamic Development Banks is playing a major role there, and also some participatory Turkish banks, which are actually Islamic banks, are heavily involved in Islamic finance in Africa, which of course bodes very well for Takaful and Takaful in this continent. Let's now move from the geographical boundaries to the conceptual boundaries and further. And I'm pleased to ask Dr. Shahinaz to get to the roster and deliver his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to present today. My topic is quite unique in relation to the topics that have been presented throughout the conference, because first of all, our panel today is talking about new frontiers, so we are looking at it from everyone's perspective. From our perspective, we look at it as a leasing community, or which is a non-banking community that relies immensely on Takaful. And my topic is about nurturing the corporate client. So there are so many ways by which you can look at this topic, but the way I'm presenting the topic, actually, I am presenting it as being one of the target audience for Takaful companies. We represent the leasing industry. By virtue of my role in the association and chairing the board of the association, which is a trade association encompassing all leasing companies in Egypt, be it Ijara-based models or conventional leasing companies, we believe that Takaful is a very important industry, and there is a huge potential for Takaful industry to develop, as much as there is a huge potential for Ijara-based companies to prosper. First of all, I will try to present a little bit of background about the leasing industry and Islamic financing and the ratio of Ijara-based companies versus conventional leasing. Then we will present just a few concepts about Sukuk, and I'll make a few comments regarding the Sukuk law issuance. And then we will talk about how does this relate to the Takaful industry. In that part, I'm showing some statistics, but actually statistics, I don't want to just replicate other presentations, because I'm sure a lot of Takaful experts are in this room who are in a better position to talk about Takaful. But from our point of view, we'll talk about how we would like to see the Takaful industry in a few years to come. Then we will try to make two applications about Takaful, in what way and what form we see Takaful industry serving the leasing industry and the Islamic banking industry at large. And at that point in time, I will talk about two applications, the role of Takaful for in the context of Sukuk. And the second part, and the last but not least, is the role of Takaful for the micro-leasing industry. And then, which is the most important part, is just coming up with recommendations for the organizers, and actually part of those recommendations were already presented to His Excellency the Prime Minister in a similar convention, but with a different context. So we will try to apply more hands-on recommendations to that particular conference. Just talking about Islamic modes of financing, actually my presentation is focusing on only one type of financing, which is Ijara, and by Ijara we mean leasing, and we'll just talk about the difference. But to begin with, well, why am I focusing on Ijara? It's not just that I tend to board or I tend to chair the leasing industry. No, it's because of the potential, the huge potential that we see coming from leasing. And that potential is growing every day with the emergence of Islamic finance in Egypt. Because before Islamic finance had a real touch in Egypt, we, as a leasing industry, have been in the market since 1995. And to a great extent, most scholars would agree that leasing industry, especially if we were able to adhere to Sharia in our contracts, we, to a great extent, tend to comply with Sharia, and that product was in great need for Sharia compliant or Sharia sensitive customers who were looking for, who were shying away from dealing with banks and just looking for these leasing options. The second thing is that leasing worldwide is very much a very flexible product, because you can apply leasing to at the governmental level. We've done leasing transactions for some of the ministries here in Egypt. Of course, there's a lot more to come. And I believe that the government should be capitalizing more on leasing as a non-banking product, just like the case with the banking. In addition, leasing is a very viable non-banking product that served a lot of large corporates. And you'd be amazed to know that the leasing industry has been in competition on large ticket deals with prominent banks, and amazingly, some of the deals we managed actually to take. But this does not mean that leasing is there only to serve the large ticket, because we believe elsewhere in the world, leasing has played a tremendous role in trying to tap on the micro lease segment, and that's actually the last part of my presentation. And finally, why leasing again? It's because of with the emergence of the Sukuk law. I'm sure most of us would agree that Sukuk Ijara has been one of the most prominent latest Sukuk issuances. Most Sukuk issuances, comprise Sukuk Ijara, so we find at least 65%, if not 70%, of the latest Sukuk issuances, be it on the sovereign level or on the corporate level, has been actually Sukuk Ijara again. So how does this fit with the leasing industry? It fits a lot, because at the end of the day, Sukuk Ijara is one of the most important products that we would rely on as leasing companies to raise funds from the secondary market. So we actually do this by securitizing these portfolios, and this is how we can grow the leasing industry, and that would actually make a tremendous role for Takaful, as we will show in the next coming slides. So, Ijara, just for your information, in simple words, Ijara, I would say, is just similar to Ijara would be, we usually call Ijara as the right of use, or the right to use a particular asset, which is the usufruct. And actually, there's a big difference, and actually there's a Sharia difference between owning an asset and just having the right to use. And believe it or not, the difference between leasing and Ijara is exactly the reason, or the point, that people who just say Sukuk shouldn't be allowed by virtue of just we're selling the assets of the government. And in that point in time, we need to differentiate really between what we mean by selling assets and transferring the right of use. Because in Ijara, we don't sell assets, because that's a common misconception. But actually, part of this misconception comes from lack of clarity in the laws. And actually, we as an association will be presenting a lot of recommendations to the regulators to try to make a distinction between when we talk about Ijara and focus on the right of use versus leasing, which could be an option to buy in a preset sales transaction. This is just a simple schematic diagram just to show, for those of you who would like to learn more about leasing. Leasing is a very simple, straightforward transaction. And actually, if we usually say that in such a transaction, if the asset is just the company or the lessee has the right to use the asset and not own the asset, then this is perfectly well, this is Ijara. And with it comes a lot of responsibilities on the part of the lessor in terms of insurance, and this is where Takaful companies come in. So normally, in order to have an appropriate Ijara-based model, okay, be it sort of a direct purchase, just like in the case of the diagram we've just seen, or be it a sell and lease back transaction. If we were to operate this compliant to Sharia, then we would have to make it clear in the contracts that the lessee hasn't got the right to own the asset, it's just the right to use the asset, which is the use of it. And in that point in time, this is actually a major point that people just tend to get confused with. There are two main types for leasing or ijara. We have ijara waqtina. This is usually when, at the end of the lease contract, usually it happens that there's some sort of a unilateral promise on the part of the lessor. If the lessee wish to exercise his option to buy, then that could take place. Versus ijara thumma al-bi'a, or just what we call actually ijara tajariya, that's a more common term, which means that it's just that we are happy with just the usage of the asset instead of owning the asset in the end of the contract. One of the reasons why leasing, and especially leasing low, is versatile, because we can basically lease all types of assets, and not just assets that would be tangible assets. You would find even the law, the Egyptian law would allow, for the leasing, would allow companies to sell rights of use. So in the leasing industry, we've done a lot of transactions even for STM ones, or right of use for telecom companies. We've done access systems for databases, IT equipment, even some rights of use for things. It's just the right of use of any proprietary right would be, again, leasing. So it's very versatile. And based on the current accounting standards of the leasing law, actually it's supporting the leasing industry in terms of providing tax advantages, because leasing is actually deductible. The lease installments is deductible from income statements. So we have a tax advantage. In addition, the accounting standards, actually you would always find, according to the Egyptian accounting standards, of course not the international one, you would find leasing, as just mentioned, in a footnote, which means it's an off-balance sheet item. And in that sense, it's somehow supportive, just makes the financials look, from a cosmetic point of view, looks better. And actually that's another advantage. For the leasing industry, we have a little bit, compared to banks, we would normally ask, especially if it's in the case of SMEs, ask for a low initial capital investment. And this is again where Takaful companies can come in, because if we were to really rely heavily on Takaful companies to take the risk, be it in credit insurance, then I am sure the low initial capital investment would be even much more. So we wouldn't normally ask for any more down payments if we are backed by a strong insurance industry that would provide credit insurance that would cover 100% maybe one day. So this is a point that we usually consider. For SMEs or micro leases, which we're talking about, actually one of the advantages of the leasing industry, even post the financial crisis, we will see the graphs and we will see that there was a little bit of a slight of a drop. It's not really a drop, but actually a drop compared to the last year's figures, because there was a major aircraft deals done by Egypt, and actually I don't see the leasing industry was, in that sense, really declining. But I will comment on this. But it's very important that we know that leasing industry has been very much supported for SMEs. Okay, microfinance maybe not that much, to be honest with you. But for SMEs, we've been doing a lot of support. And post the revolution, amazingly, banks would, ideally speaking, pass on the risk to us as leasing companies, and we would take the risk of SMEs. And in that sense, we find leasing to be supportive to SMEs. Just a little bit of, just to get to know more about the composition of the leasing market. Actually, the main players are actually 10 major market players. You would find the 10 major market players are of three types. We have the bank collected, so you would find a bank like Baraka would have their own standalone leasing company under a separate law. It's a joint stock company. And you would have Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank has got its own leasing company as well, which is a bank-related type of leasing companies. In the meantime, we have independent models that are not reliant on banks, and those are really the models that are that really needs a lot of support from organizations and associations. And the final type, which is vendor finance, or what we call vendor lease type of companies, and actually there are some vendors here as well with their own leasing operations. Overall, just looking at the history for the past few years, you would find that right before the revolution, the leasing industry has shown a major or a tremendous surge, and that's very noticeable from 2009 2010. And when we were doing the statistics at that point in time, actually we were configuring that for the projections that the leasing industry would actually exceed 20 billion. But unfortunately, what happened is that, as you all know, the leasing industry depends tremendously on funding from banks. So if we are in a situation where there is a credit crunch and banks would feel reluctant financing the leasing industry, that would eventually backfire on the volume of the industry. And this is exactly the reason why, as a leasing association, we would like to bring about more Sharia-compliant tools to the market, to support Ijara-based companies, to be self-sustainable and independent, so we wouldn't normally face a problem like the one we faced in the middle of a credit crunch when banks started to actually squeeze their credit policies, and actually that was the case. Through the graph you can see that actually, again, I just would like to confirm that we don't see a drop in the leasing figures. It's just that we happen to have a very large transaction in 2011. It was an aircraft transaction done, actually a couple of transactions done by Egypt Air, and actually it somehow inflated the figures in 2011, and in that sense those transactions are no longer there, so we don't tend to see a real drop in the market. Actually there was an increase if we just excluded those two transactions. For the value of the contracts, actually that was done on only actually not even Q4, that was the most updated statistics in December. And interestingly enough, you would find that the leasing industry, by virtue of it just serving all type of product classes and all types of sectors, you would find that every month we have something different. So in that month we have real estate coming on top of the list. Actually, we managed to have a lot of project finance being done in that area. And amazingly, project finance was done despite the fact that there was a huge deterioration in the contracting business. So that proves to you that the leasing industry is supporting all types of sectors, even during credit crunch. And the second asset class was trucks. And if you looked at the figures in November, you would totally see something different. You would find actually equipment was 40%, which means that every month we have a lot of dynamism within the leasing industry, and by virtue that we actually cover all product classes. For Sukuk, of course not a situation to try to educate about Sukuk because that's a long story. But we just want to raise a few points here. Sukuk is basically an Islamic bond, and I was myself very surprised about the fact that Sukuk, and even that was a question raised, why just take off the word Islamic from Sukuk and this is back to Sukuk. So it's not about labeling, to be honest with you, it's about the content. So even when we had our own opinions on the draft of the Sukuk law, we really didn't matter about whatever name you're going to call it. You can call it Sukuk or whatever, but at the end of the day, we really need to see a Sharia-compliant product coming to the marketplace. And in that sense, we would like to again confirm that Sukuk Ijara is actually taking or just making a lot of, it's just being one of the top Sukuk issuances, the most of the Sukuk issuances, the top Sukuk issuances were done actually using Sukuk Ijara, and in that sense, Sukuk is a very important product for the leasing industry to be able to be independent. And we believe that if the government, if the first Sukuk issuance were to come to the marketplace, the sovereign Sukuk, then we would play a very important major role with the government, because if we, like for example, just drawing on experience from the Sukuk Ijara done in Turkey, there were a lot of amendments in the law to accommodate such a sovereign Sukuk, and one of the law amendments in Turkey had been issuing a separate law and introducing the concept of asset leasing companies. Okay, so asset leasing companies would be a kind of an SPV owned by the government as an originator. So again, leasing would pop up again. So it's just that we would like to move on to the Takaful industry and see how does this link all together. For Takaful, I don't want, of course, to repeat what my other colleagues had already mentioned yesterday and today, but I just wanted to draw attention to the EOFI definition of Takaful, because actually one of the things that we're trying to raise in the Sukuk law issuance is that we have to start to abide by Islamic international standards, and this is where EOFI can come in, and that's why we have to be aware about the definitions that we use. For the uses of Takaful, as you all know, it could apply being general and family Takaful over a wide range of product class. And this is exactly the point. We tend to see the leasing industry serving all types of product class, and if we had the right support from Takaful industry, okay, be it in form of general insurance, like credit insurance, supporting SMEs transactions, supporting micro-lease, as I will mention in a few minutes. And this is what we are expecting out of the Takaful industry. Because if Sukuk law comes in, then we have a very well reliable source of funding from the secondary market. And if we are backed up by a very strong Takaful industry that can support our penetration to SMEs and microfinance, then I would tend to envision the leasing industry being maybe doubling, quadrupling in a few years to come. And actually this is the most important thing we tend to focus on at the moment. This is just basic figures that you've already mentioned about the international, from an international front, about the permeation of Takaful and the high growth rates ranging 25, and even some statistics they say it's 30%. So definitely there is a huge potential coming from the Takaful industry, why not just in Egypt? So Egypt is never an exception. And the only thing that I would like to draw your attention to, actually this is a very, it's just a sort of a correlation that we tend to see about Takaful in Islamic finance, because the markets that's been relying more on Islamic finance, like just take Malaysia as an example. We tend to see Malaysia, for example, from the contributions to the Islamic finance market, and just compare this to the Takaful industry. You would see that as much as Malaysia is being highly ranked in terms of the top Sukuk issuances worldwide, again, Malaysia is doing really well when it comes to the Takaful industry. So, be it family, general business. So the point that we're trying to make here, that this is very much in line with our with the argument that I'm trying to make here, that in order to have a strong Islamic finance industry, or just be it banking, non-banking, Islamic finance, just like leasing or ijara, we have to be backed up by a strong Takaful industry. So there is a huge correlation between the two industries together. The same goes to Egypt. We would like to see more Takaful companies coming to the marketplace, as much as we would like to see more ijara-based companies coming to the marketplace. Because one of the law amendments that we're currently doing to the current leasing law that was issued in 1995 and amended in 2001, we already mentioned to the regulators, okay, we have ijara-based companies, despite the fact that the general context is a leasing law, as much as we have Takaful-based companies, despite the fact that it's a major conventional insurance law. So this means that ijara companies and Takaful companies, okay, they are in existence and they are growing and they are coming to the marketplace, but they would like to see more support on the part of the regulators. And this is the role of the association. Most of our initiatives are done on the macro level, and one of the changes or the amendments that we're requesting is that we have to be in full compliance to Sharia. If we operate ijara-based product, it must be in full compliance with Sharia, and we must get the support of the regulators. And one of the things that I would have to draw to your attention to, that there is a huge article in the leasing law talking about insurance. So I can't visualize an ijara-based company just getting a Sharia-compliant funding, Sharia-compliant operations, governance, you name it, and then they're using a conventional insurance. That doesn't make sense to me, and I think that's what the point that we're trying to make here. So, role of Takaful, it's huge. Actually, every single leased property, okay, we would have to be backed up by a Takaful partner. And one of the things that we really suffer from as leasing companies, and actually the clients are suffering from, is that if we don't have a proper support from the insurance company, if we just take a transaction for a client just having an asset, especially if we're talking about the SMEs or microfinance, if all what he has is already this asset, and that asset is leased, let's say logistics company, small medium enterprise, operating a logistic fleet of trucks, and something went wrong with that fleet of trucks. The car was stolen, or the truck was stolen, or just any kind of damage. And imagine what would happen if there is no support from the insurance side. Sometimes for conventional leasing companies, they would ask the client to still pay the lease installments, despite the fact that the vehicle or the truck that he has, which is his main source of income, we're talking about an SME, microfinance. There's no other source of cash flow coming from but that particular asset. So that would be pretty much unfair. I would even say so. Leasing companies must try to find a solution. So the client is not the real solution. The solution just, okay, keep on paying the payments. The insurance company will just redeem you in a few days in time, months and months and months, and that's exactly the problem. So if we are operating an Ijara-based solution, we wouldn't normally do so. We would normally have to work it out by collaborating well with the insurance industry to ensure that there's proper claims being done, and the same goes to Takaful. So, Sukuk, the way I see it, the link, 3 sources. Sukuk Ijara is a source of funding for the leasing industry. So, as much as we build portfolios, we are there to get the support of Takaful companies to help us ensure such portfolios. And again, Sukuk Ijara is sort of a business opportunity for the Takaful industry in that sense. And the most important thing, which is the current practice, is that Sukuk Ijara can be a vehicle for investment for Takaful industries. And as the statistics shows, it's actually 2/3 of Takaful companies or portfolios in Malaysia are being invested in Sukuk vis-a-vis equities because of the volatility issues. So the final part, so we talked about the role of leasing, role of Takaful, application for leasing and Takaful in terms of Sukuk, and the final thing, which is the application on a micro-lease level. Again, microfinance is a huge topic, and we had a presentation yesterday about microfinance, so I don't want to be redundant again. So the only point that I would like to draw your attention to, that micro-leasing schemes has been growing worldwide, and a lot of the experiences we've seen in international markets, even like the case for Grameen Bank, it was all just the same story. It's the same target segment, the poor, the low-income groups, be it in agri sector, being in industrial sectors, who would like to have a flexible, versatile, non-banking tool to support, okay? And here comes in micro-leasing. But micro-leasing can never work out without having a strong micro-Takaful. And that's why you would find that most leasing companies would shy away from the microfinance segment. We actually had only one leasing company supporting the microfinance, and we did a lot of initiatives financing the microfinance segment, but that was an exception. Most leasing companies would go after large ticket deals or just SMEs, and that's why we claim that if we were to have enough support from the Takaful industry for Ijara-based companies, having a micro-Takaful product, a strong one, reliable one, then we would see a lot of leasing companies just running after the microfinance segment, just like they do with the other segments. Of course, when it comes to the microfinance, the sky is the limit, because we have a very low. Actually, when you compare the supply to the demand, it's quite luminous. So we tend to see that the microfinance actually, it's not just SMEs, because in Egypt we talk a lot about SMEs. Every conference you go, you would find the title SMEs always there. So it's not just about SMEs. Actually, when you start to look at the microfinance industry, you'd be amazed to know that Egypt is in need of microfinance professionals as much as they are in need for SMEs professionals. So this is what we have to focus on. And just to sum up, this is a study done by EFSA. Actually, it's quite a classic one. It was done in 2009. I tend to see there's a huge scarcity in terms of statistics when it comes to microfinance. So the only point that we would like to draw your attention to, that one of the challenges in micro Takaful, okay, done for the microfinance segments, it's just the issue of, again, regulatory and just the support of the government and the support. So there are some issues on the macro level, other issues on the micro level need to be tackled. And that's why we tend to address those issues in conferences like this to regulators. And that's why I tend to focus on the final part, which is the most important part, what to do and what's the next step. Recommendations, it's just we have to tackle the following critical success factors. If we just looked around us, try to see how can we make the environment more conducive to being Sharia compliance. The last thing we want to see is just Takaful companies operating just like conventional insurance companies. Government support, of course, through a lot of laws and the legislation should be issued in that part. Cost-benefit approach, that will come by volume, because micro Takaful is a product that relies on a huge volume. So we have to really focus on this. Product development and innovation, of course. We as leasing industry, if we are trying to nurture corporate clients like leasing companies, you really need to innovate. So innovation does not stop when it comes to other products like Sukuk, just Takaful. We have to come up with a lot of insurance products that are in match with the growing needs of banking and non-banking industries. And I have to give credit to the Federation for Insurance, because actually they have been trying to innovate on the part of issuing a lot of different types of insurance policies that are in match with the growing needs of the market. Last but not least is the awareness and acceptability item, because actually, unless we start to build awareness into the market and try to educate the market, there is no way out. So such conferences are very important. Seminars, training, actually this is what we try to do. So if we sum up those critical success factors into recommendations, we can see that insurance companies, both insurance companies and financial institutions, be it banks or leasing companies, they really need to reconsider and rethink how they would approach financial risks and how would they meet the needs of the growing market, and especially when it comes to the Takaful. And we need to start to link more products like Sukuk, Islamic finance, Ijara into Takaful industry to help it to grow as well. And we need to allow the leasing company to work hand in hand with the Takaful to try to focus on untapped segments like SMEs and microfinance. We need to get the support of regulators in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capacity building, in terms of legislations. We really need a lot, so we should help this. We need the support of IT providers. We have IT providers here, and I believe that micro Takaful and micro leasing can never come without the support of IT partner with the systems and technology. We need to draw attention to multilateral organizations, and actually I do encourage multilateral organizations like IFC and the IDB to try to focus more on the target segment. Okay, it's very important to have intermediaries, but at one point in time, it's very difficult to tap on the market by just relying on intermediaries, because it all depends on the terms and conditions and the pricing. How much, to what extent would SMEs and microfinance really benefit from donations and coming to Egypt, Okay? We really need to address such issues to make sure that SMEs and microfinance are getting the full benefits of the donations being given to Egypt. And the final thing, and I would say the most crucial thing, but I have no intention to talk about because we already will share this in the last panel, it's how to bridge the gap between theory and practice. We're not looking for labels here. We're not looking for labels for Takaful companies, just Takaful, but internally you would find the systems and processes in the Sharia manual and governance is not in compliance to Sharia. So this is the role of education. And one of the most critical challenges that is currently facing Egypt, and we tend to address it as a Metropolitan Training Academy, is that we come from conventional schools, right? And we have a lot of conventional practitioners on boards who should be well equipped to learn more about Islamic finance. We can't just rely on Sharia scholars. With all my due respect, we have the most prominent Sharia school on earth, which is Al-Azhar. But in just talking practically, in practice, what happens, Azhar scholars would sit on Sharia boards. But you wouldn't normally find them in departments, credit departments, or what we'd say product development. Product development has to be a blend or a marriage between someone who has a hands-on experience and someone who has a Sharia background. So this is a dilemma, okay? So the best thing to have is that we try to educate both. We try to educate Sharia scholars to become more hands-on, pragmatic type of approach. We have to train them on this, and we have to train conventional practitioners to have the right Sharia background, okay? They wouldn't normally end up by sitting on Sharia boards, but they are in a situation where they have to innovate, and to innovate, you have to really have a little bit of Sharia background. Otherwise, the pools of products that will be coming to the market will be, in essence, conventional with the label Islamic. And actually, I would highly encourage you to stay to the last session to talk about how can you educate yourself and how can you try to bridge the gap that we're trying to make. Thank you very much.